The story begins in Mobile, Alabama, a place you've probably never heard of and have definitely never been to. But despite it being relatively unknown, it's actually a very historical city that should be taught in schools. And for that reason, we start off with some much needed and very important history. For those who are unfamiliar, the Atlantic slave trade was made illegal in 1808 by the United States government. This meant that slaves could no longer be imported to the country, a very monumental moment in history. But despite this great progress, many slave owners in Alabama decided to completely disregard the law. So for 52 years, illegal slave ships were still arriving to the port of Mobile. Thankfully though, in 1860, the United States government finally decided to crack down. They successfully captured the very last slave ship to ever approach US soil. And after seizing it, they took the 110 captives and dropped them off in North Mobile. They were essentially given a plot of land called Africatown, and they were told to figure it out. This is what makes it so unique and interesting. Over the next 100 years, they basically created their own community and even spoke their own language at home. And with very little outside interaction, they built their own homes, schools, restaurants, and many businesses. Yes, it was a very poor community, but the important part is that they owned and built everything they had. And if you know anything about economics, you know that ownership is the only way to a successful community. I say that to say that the potential was there, but sadly it wouldn't be there for long. In the 1950s, the United States government introduced a controversial plan called urban renewal. Essentially, they designated certain areas as decaying and used this to seize all of the property. Obviously, this is a violation of property rights and the Constitution, but back then it wasn't seen that way. So they went to various neighborhoods across the country and pretty much bulldozed them to the ground. Whether it was the Fillmore in San Francisco, the 7th Ward in New Orleans, or Mobile, Alabama, they pretty much went to a bunch of neighborhoods and destroyed them. And by the end of the 1950s, over 75% of Africatown was completely demolished. The community sadly had to watch everything they built be torn to the ground. The deep history and cornerstones of the community were now replaced by endless public housing. And on top of this, they even changed the neighborhood's name from Africatown to the Happy Hills. Like, damn, we can't even keep the name? Well, to me, urban renewal is one of the biggest stains in American history as it destroyed so many communities. It essentially turned homeowners and business owners to welfare recipients overnight, and as you would expect, the government did not take care of what they replaced it with. The residents were exposed to broken ceilings, mold, and rodent-infested apartments, and on top of this, there were no local businesses left in the area. So as you would expect, this led to some bad consequences, and Happy Hills became an extremely rough and dangerous area. Unlike LA, where the hoods have 2-story homes, manicured lawns, and palm trees, this right here is the real trenches. And in this environment, there's no squabbling enemies or catching DPs, it's straight cutthroat at all times. The smallest disagreements can go straight to lethal consequences, and there's no such thing as a fair fight. It's truly a sad circumstance, but it's been the way of life in Happy Hills for quite some time. Trust me when I say that this environment is no joke, and that takes us to the early 1990s.